Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Claire, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Hollie Edwards. Hollie is a counsellor and supervisor. She is the Director of Mental Health and Wellbeing at Herne Bay Junior School in Kent. Hollie has developed a model of supervision for staff in education and has written a book called Reflective Supervision in Education, using supervision to support pupil and staff wellbeing. That book is being published in August 2023. And today, Hollie and I are talking about supervision in education. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Hollie, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am very well. I have been genuinely looking forward to this episode. I think in particular, we talked a tiny bit off air. I think it's such an important topic that we're covering, related actually to the book that you've written around supervision in education. But I wanted to start off the episode by thinking about what you wish you knew then that you know now about the topic.
Okay, that is a really interesting question, and I've learned a lot along the way. So and it's been quite a big journey. Lots of learning has gone on from when I decided at school that it's something that I wanted to start doing with my staff. I was really keen. We really need supervision. So I've learned so much, but actually I would say probably the thing that I wish I had really known and valued as much as I do now is just how important the reflection aspect of reflective supervision is, which sounds silly really, but the reflective supervision part sort of came after, I would say. So I always was aware that reflection was a really big part of that process. But actually by doing it, I really now understand how important it is for people to have a space, a safe space, to be able to reflect and think about things that they've experienced, things that they've learned, just stop, I suppose, take a moment to pause.
I think it's that word that you mentioned, the safe space is so important for me as a practitioner, that there is a space where I can express those experiences and it isn't tied by judgments or by performance management or anything like that, that it is safe for me to express. And I think sometimes in education that can be quite limited.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. It's the school environment is such a busy environment all the time. So I think there are just really limited opportunities to stop and to, even have conversations with colleagues, and really, it doesn't really happen anymore, which is sad to say. But it's just all go all the time. So to have the opportunity to stop, to sit back, to have that safe space is really, really important.
The power of hindsight. I love that question because it really gets us to think about, which bits we could rewind back into time. But tell us a bit more about your experience, Hollie, with the topic.
So it stems essentially from, I'm a counsellor, and I started working at the school. I've always offered counselling as part of my role, but I started as a family liaison officer. And as I say, was offering counselling as well. And as being a counsellor, as any counsellor will tell you, I've always had to have my own supervision. It's part of the job role. You have to have it every month. And I think after being at the school for a while, my role changed after a few years, and I became the mental health lead, and it was become much more about supporting the whole school community, that whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing. So very much still looking at the students and families, but also staff. And I just really, myself, the head teacher and the rest of leadership just thought, this is something we're really missing here. Like, why don't education staff have a space to be able to talk through their work, what they do every single day, what takes up such a big part of their life. And yeah, it just became something we thought, this is something we need to be able to give people. It's their right to have that opportunity. And that's how it started, essentially. We went from there.
So that journey of realizing that you can support, but actually supporting culture and mental health well-being of staff on a larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is going to sound like a ridiculous question, and I'm sure some people listening are like, what is Claire going on about today? But I think just for everyone listening, how would we define supervision? You mentioned a few bits that you sort of discussed in that answer, but what's like a clear-cut definition of what supervision is?
Yeah, I mean, that is it really, isn't it? And it's so important. And that is a really good point to make, because lots of people in education don't know what supervision is. When I've started talking with members of our leadership, when I first started talking to members of staff at my school, and then in the wider community, and even now, all the time, people say, well, what is supervision? And it's really hard to try and sort of condense it in, but essentially I will try, and it is a professional conversation that gives you a safe space to reflect upon the impact that your work has on you, essentially. But there are a few different functions within supervision, and again, throughout my time doing it and sort of unpicking how it's worked for education staff, because it is slightly different, I think really looking at those different functions, and there's that sort of educative function where it's about sort of learning and growing together, a bit of CPD really. There's the sort of looking at that managerial function, but not in the sense of thinking about sort of appraisals and all of that kind of thing, which I think people think when they hear supervision. It's more just making sure that you as a practitioner really feel that you're doing the best job that you can do. And then there's the supportive function, which is making sure that you are supported as a person, as an individual. So that's where making sure that your well-being is sort of taken care of, and you're given that space to share and offload as well.
When we say that everyone can benefit from Team Teach training, we really do mean everyone. Our in-house training puts the emphasis on the unique needs of your setting and creates a consistent approach to behaviour across your entire organisation. Head over to the Team Teach website to find out more. And in the setting that you work in now, is that a mainstream provision, Hollie?
It is, yes. Yeah.
So, and like, this is like banking on my experience, no research, and I'm sure you've done lots of research for the book that you've written on the topic. But is it quite rare in mainstream settings to have that level of supervision set up? Is it quite a trailblazing project, really, that you've embedded in with that service?
Yeah, it is. It's really rare. I mean, again, if we're looking at sort of from the research side of things, when I was writing the book, and I used Education Support, are a great organisation for staff in schools, and used their sort of research that they do every single year. And in their report, I believe it was the 2021 report that they had written, they had actually specifically asked about staff members, how many had or have supervision, and it was 8% at the time. And I think last year's report doesn't even specifically focus on supervision. So, I mean, it's really not anything that is used on a wide scale, I think, which is fantastic. The fact that some SLT do receive external supervision now, more than they used to, but it's still really not a very high percentage. And yeah, whole school is just, well, I don't know any other schools actually.
No. So when I was doing a bit of reading around for your interview, I was like, oh wow, like this is like proper trailblazing. And I suppose through writing the book and the research that you've done, you've created a template and ideas for other services and how they can adopt it. So I suppose thinking about some of those things about setting up supervision, so how are some of the ways that a service could like start that process, because it's a big leap, isn't it, from nothing to okay, we're going to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I mean, that is, I think it's such a big thing as well, because it seems like, oh, okay, we're going to have a conversation and this is how it's going to work. But on a large scale, as we've already said, in busy schools with lots of members of staff, it was a long journey and a big process. So that's why I actually felt the book was so important, because it really outlines, it really breaks it down in the book. So the first few chapters are about why supervision is needed and what it is essentially, and then it goes into sort of the benefits of it and who might do supervision, and then it's how you can do it. It is a how-to guide essentially, so schools should be able to pick it up, understand a bit more about what supervision is, and then start to work their way through until they get to a point where actually, yeah, we're in a place where we can do this. So I would say for schools, really, number one, the most important thing is understanding what it is. That's really important, because you've got to understand, okay, this is great. I sort of get what it is, and maybe it would be good for people's well-being, and it would be really good for staff, and it would be good for pupils. But what, you've got to really have a good understanding of it. And then really it's looking at why is it something you want to do? Again, it's that reflection part. So really reflecting yourself the whole way through, whether it's a head teacher that's picked up the book, whether it's a member of SLT, whether it's a teacher, whether it's an organisation outside, that thinks it's something that they'd like to help a school to set up. That actually it's really thinking about how can they do this? How can this work for this school? Why do they want to do it? What do they want to achieve? And then sort of looking at who the supervisor might be. Would you do one-to-one supervision? Would it be group supervision? Which staff members are you going to offer it to? That's a key one, because for us, we started with the teachers and we offer group supervision, and then it sort of grew from there. So yeah, there is a real process to work through.
So you've basically done the legwork and like published it in the book, so someone can go, okay, this is how to do it. So that's fantastic. So you've described the kind of the what, the why, and the how is the kind of main ways of getting to it. And I'm thinking about the chapters that you mentioned around the benefits, because I'm thinking about the recruitment crisis and the amount of teachers, practitioners leaving the field of education, and not because necessarily of wages, etc. I think mental health well-being, I'm sure in surveys and various things, is a big protagonist in the exodus from the profession. So I suppose leading with that, the benefits of supervision might lend itself to things like recruitment retention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is as well, it's really people need and really appreciate and want to feel valued and to feel heard, and to feel, I think education staff want to feel part of, a collective. We're part of a group. We are, and have those strong connections and good relationships. And I think supervision can really help with that. And actually, that in itself enables people to feel, no, I'm part of this. This is, I don't want to leave, essentially. They know what, it's tough and there's challenges, but actually this is where I want to be. And I've got supportive people and colleagues around me that care.
Yeah, because I think I haven't worked full-time in a school for a long time now. I work one day a week in a setting, and actually my favorite day of the week, because I do lots of training and I sort of travel around and work quite individually, my favorite day of the week is actually being part of a team and feeling connected and feeling safe within that space, and safe to be who I am. And I think sometimes in the settings that I've worked in previously, a bit like how you described at the start of the podcast, it's like bang, 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 particularly like mainstream high schools where, you genuinely don't have time to go to the toilet. Like that is a luxury. And so the thought of having that time and space to stop, to reflect back your words, I think is so important. But I just think sometimes in schools we are missing that connection, and the role of supervision can build that connection.
Absolutely. So whether it's one-to-one supervision, that relationship and connection there with the supervisor and supervisee, essentially the member of staff, is really, really important. It's key. But when it's group supervision as well, and actually through one of the things that I have always done since starting supervision in our school, is I've always collected like regular feedback from staff, sort of anonymous feedback as well, like online, because I wanted people to feel that they could be really honest as well, and not worry. And that has been so useful. That's been really, really useful. And one of the biggest benefits from people is that connection with others. The ability to, it's crazy to think that these people work together all day but don't talk to each other, because they're in their classrooms, they're so busy. And particularly like for year teams or for subject teams, if it's a secondary school, it's slightly easier because you're working physically closer together. However, if you go into other parts of the school, there's members of staff they might not have ever met before. And I'm not exaggerating when I say
no,
yeah, it really, it happens. And I think actually when you can mix groups up, because that's one of the things in the book that I talk about, that actually it's really key to, like in our school, we're a junior school, so we have year 3, 4, 5 and 6, and each member of the group is from a different year group, so that it's really mixing those teams up. So and that's been hugely beneficial. And again, as I say, strengthening those relationships and those connections, it's just been really incredible on its own, really.
Yeah, it sounds like such an amazing project that has obviously benefited your service and given you a nice catalyst to write the book. I suppose with the benefits, this is me being a balanced practitioner, what are some of the pitfalls though? Where do difficulties arise with supervision?
I think some of the challenges are definitely sort of organising, that's like the practical challenges are organising it within a school timetable. That can be quite difficult sometimes, but it's workable. You can definitely do it. It's just a bit of a challenge. And I think introducing it is so key, because when you introduce it to staff, it really has to be done well. It has to be well thought out. It has to be explained, and there has to be an opportunity for people to ask questions, and to put their sort of thoughts and feelings across, because a lot of people won't have experienced it before or don't understand it. And actually, some staff members early on when we started it sort of felt it was almost a bit like therapy, or they'd have to come along and be really open and share a lot about themselves, and be quite vulnerable, which was quite scary, understandably. So I think explaining it really, really well to people is important. And if people are a bit wary or a bit skeptical or nervous, that is a challenge. Because you want people to come along and get as much as they can from it, and really find it a positive experience. But for some people, that will come naturally, and for others, it is harder.
It is, and I think you're right, because there becomes this perception, doesn't there, that supervision is a form of counselling, or you're going to have to bare your soul, but that how you introduce it, and what came across in your answer actually was around that we're not just doing it to people, we're doing it with them. And I think in introducing something new and different, that's so important, that it's a together project, not right, this is this and we're dictating this now, but we're doing that together.
Absolutely. And I've actually written that, exactly what you just said in the book. So well done. I'm pleased that came across. It is, it's not something that we're doing to people. Like, this is something that you've got to do, because actually, and while we're on that part, bringing up one of the sort of concerns, I don't know, that sounds a bit too strong, but one of the worries of staff members to start with is, how are we going to fit it in? It's another thing to do in an already packed schedule. So that was a concern. But once people began the process and felt more confident, it was really interesting, because again, doing the sort of some of the feedback I got back from staff was that actually they thought it should be more often. So it sort of went from one extreme to the other.
You need it every day, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it is definitely really important that people are part of the process. And a lot of the feedback, well, some of the feedback that I've had, I have been able to make changes to the sessions from feedback from others. Sometimes it's not possible, but you know, it's always really important for me as a reflective practitioner myself to hear how other people are experiencing it, things that are working well for them, what maybe isn't working so well. Yeah, that's good for me too, because I'm very much part of the process as the supervisor.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be saying, right, we're going to do reflective practice and then ignore the feedback that people are having, because that's all part of the role modelling and the process of what we're doing.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to be really good with the timings, Hollie, and sometimes I'm really into this topic and I'm like, oh, I could ask so many more things, but I just wanted to get us to a book recommendation, which I think we've kind of nodded towards across the podcast.
Yeah. So yeah, I was saying to you really briefly before we started recording that there are plenty of books about supervision that I would be able to recommend, brilliant books, and there's lots out there. However, there aren't many, and there aren't actually any about setting up supervision in schools. And so I think it's really important for people that are listening, if it's something that they are interested in and would like to do, to perhaps go and have a look at my book that is now available to pre-order, but will be released on the 21st of August of this year. And that is Reflective Supervision in Education. So it's using supervision to support staff and pupil well-being. So I think that would be an ideal book for you to go and purchase.
Amazing. And Helly looks after the content, are really interested in picking up our copies as well. And if you could just finish with 3 tips for services listening, that'd be great.
Yeah. I think it took me a while actually I was thinking about this, thinking, there's so many that I can think about sort of in terms of staff taking care of their well-being. And I didn't want to just focus on supervision essentially, because that would, a lot of people haven't had it or don't know what it is yet. So I thought I'm going to focus more generally. And I think it was just thinking about that idea of self-care for people and but in work. So, if you are finding work overwhelming, or you're feeling stressed, or you're finding things are a bit of a challenge for you, just finding an opportunity somewhere in your day to take some time out and having a bit like we were saying at the beginning about supervision, having that safe space to just pause or stop for a moment. And I think it's just for people to have permission to be able to just pause and stop and do something that they enjoy, whatever it is. So that was the first one. The second one, I said that sort of reaching out and speaking to someone. So if you are finding things really challenging and they are impacting on your well-being day to day or on your mental health, then it's really important to actually speak to someone. So I think, in terms of, we always say speak to family, speak to friends, absolutely do that. But I would really encourage people to speak to their head teacher, or to speak to a member of leadership in the school, or a colleague, or I mentioned education support earlier, give them a call and speak to someone, go to your GP. I think it's just remembering that there is always someone there available to talk to you. You're never on your own. So it's really, really important to feel that, you can go and speak to someone if you need that support. And then finally, I thought I've got to have one that does sort of bring in reflection, because it's so important. And that is just having a space for self-reflection. So obviously I'm talking about reflective supervision. So that's an ideal space for it. But if you don't have supervision yet, or it's something you haven't started yet, just finding an opportunity and time to reflect on what it is you do every day, you know, and actually what went well, what didn't go quite so well, what would you do differently next time, why would you, and really sort of encouraging that reflection to increase self-awareness, so that you can make, you know, we all go through life, I think, sometimes, and we just do the same things we've done over and over again because it's what we do. But actually just stopping and thinking, is this the right way to do it, or do I just do it because this is what I'm used to doing? Could I do it differently next time? So I think just making sure that you have that opportunity for self-reflection really is really important.
It is really, I'm so glad we got the self-reflection in there as well. It's such an important aspect of all that we do. But thank you so much for your time, Hollie, and I'll catch up with you soon. You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.